Welcome to J Lowe Artist YouTube channel. Today we'll be doing some drawing with graphite. So get out your pencils, your cotton swab, kneaded eraser, anything that you think you need to draw with. Have it right handy. And let's draw together. Remember, art makes life better.
So the first thing we do are simple shapes. So we're going to set our 6B pencil. This is our dark pencil. This is what we're going to use to do all the really dark areas and some of the really tight details. We're going to use that 6B pencil. So I'm going to set that aside, and I'm going to start out with my number 2 pencil. And remember that we draw with the side of our pencil, and so when you're initially drawing, you're doing what I call the layout and getting everything kind of laid out the way you want it. We're going to use the side of our pencil. And so you kind of pick it up, you can hold it. Sometimes you can hold it in between those 2 fingers. Some people like to wrap their fingers around it like this. It's totally up to you, whatever you feel comfortable with. But just be aware that drawing like this at first is not comfortable because you've never done it before. But once you get used to it, then it becomes second nature. So the first thing I want to do is let's figure out where the bear goes. So you want it to use up a big chunk of your paper. So start out, and his backside's cut off just a little bit. So you can come in and say, I want my bear to be like right in here. Want him to be that big. Okay, so you're using most of your paper. You do want to give yourself a little bit of room down here, maybe for legs. There might be a leg that comes down here, a leg that comes over here. That fish is going to be over here somewhere. So you just start throwing it in where you think it needs to go. That way it establishes your size where you want it. Maybe that leg's going to come off there. Maybe this leg should be over here. Okay, and maybe that part there where that fish is, if that fish goes right there, and then his head's going to come up here, that's about the size of head you want. Maybe a bigger head, just slightly bigger. His shoulder kind of comes up over here. Big, broad shoulder over there. And so it's kind of like sculpting from a rock. You have a big rock, you have to cut off pieces and kind of sculpt it to its basic form, its basic shapes. So that's what we're doing here. We're just getting basic shapes. There's his leg, maybe another leg over here. Back legs maybe off there. It's too bad his backside's cut off in the picture. I would really like to have more of a finality of that, but that's okay. We'll leave that like that. Compositionally, it's not great. Now, here's something that you may want to consider. When you're drawing like the background, see that rock behind his head? That rock is a little in the wrong spot, just because it kind of blends in with his head. So I'm going to take that rock and leave it out. Now, if you think to yourself, oh, I need some rock in there, you can put some of that rock in there, but not have it touch his head. So you can like pretend that you're going to break that rock apart. Otherwise, that rock blends into his head, and it just, something that as a photographer, you really can't do unless you get into Photoshop or something and start taking things out. So, but as an artist, we can change all that stuff. So that's kind of fun. Here's a little ear right there. There's a little ear kind of popping up. A little ear over here. His eyes, if you take that circle that we drew, his eyes are about right smack dab in the middle. And so we can just come over and just do a little dark shape for the eye. Don't draw lines. If you're drawing like this, you're ruining your picture already. Because you're going to draw lines and then decide, oh, I don't like those. Or you're going to shade, and they'll go over those lines, and those lines will always be there. And you're like, I tried to get rid of those lines. So use the side of your pencil. There's 3 reasons we do this. Number 1, because it's faster. And you're drawing with your elbow and your shoulder. That way your hand is not on the page and smearing things. Number 2, it's superficial. It's on the surface, so it's easily erased. And number 3, you get better lines. You get better So here's his little nose. I'm just going to come in and here's his little dark nose. Now, all this stuff is going to go darker. And so just to start with, I think we're okay. The head of the fish, we might even make this fish just a little bit bigger. You know, it's that fish tail thing that you really, hey, look at the size of fish I caught. And at this point, there's really no reason to erase much. There's his back. His back's got to slump a little bit. There's a little less on the back over there. Drop that off. Then let's start doing a little shading. Once we get this basically the way we want it, look at the darkest areas and shade those in. So there's a little bit of darkness behind his ear, a little bit over his shoulder here, and his neck. Kind of comes down there. There's a little bit that comes down to his eye right there. And again, it's not perfect. But that's okay, because we'll make it perfect. It'll start to get better. There's a little shape that kind of comes around his snout. It gets a little darker under those eyes. Of course, it's not going to be this light either. We'll have to go into that. But right now, what we're doing is just shading enough to get the proportions, to get everything kind of the way it goes. And if you decide, oh, that eye is too low, you can raise it up a little bit. And again, it's easy to get rid of because it's on the surface. It's very superficial. There's that darker area under his neck, down his arm or leg, whatever that is. I guess they only have 4 legs, right? There's a little darkness, so there's water splashing over his paw right here. There's a little bit of a paw, you can see it right there. So you just leave it out. You know that there's water splashing over there. That's okay. And there's water splashing around in there. We'll get that too. His arm, his leg here, comes right off his nose. So if you look under that fish there and just under his nose, that arm kind of comes off right there. So with proportioning, we're lining things up. And this one needs to go over a little bit, so I'm going to just add a little bit of darkness over there and make it go over a little bit. It's quite dark under here. So hopefully it's now starting to kind of look like a bear. There's a little bit of black along his fur up there over his shoulder. Also, when I draw, I usually try to go in the direction that the hair is flowing. So if it's an animal, of course, his hair is going to flow away from his head and down the back. And even on the head, it starts out kind of in between the eyes, and this part here flows this way, and this part here flows this way. So this is very light, okay? Please don't put in a lot of contrast right from the start. It'll be a little harder for you to work with. Now, once you get experienced, then maybe that's going to be okay to do. But right now, I would say it's easier to do a little at a time. And I'm not going to worry about that rock back there. Besides that, Anything in the background needs to be fuzzy and soft. That's going to help increase our depth. As things get farther away from you, they get grayer, hazier, fuzzier, softer. Cameras can actually help that by focusing on something that's closer, and then the background gets all fuzzy. And yeah, we want to keep that going. Even the fish, if you want to put a little bit of darkness on the fish, the back of the salmon is probably a little darker than the front. So now what I want to do is I'm going to take my cotton swab. I'm just going to do a little bit of blending. There isn't much graphite on here. There's not a ton, but I want to get some of those softer tones. Plus, I want to be able to look at it and say, okay, are my proportions correct? Does this look pretty close to what I'm looking at? So I'm just going to take my cotton swab and do a little bit of blending. That'll soften those up, but still everything's on the surface. So if I needed to, I could still erase it. Any kind of very light grays, I can put those in right now with my cotton swab. The edges, he's a very soft, and you don't want a hard line around the edges anyway, because you want him to look soft and fuzzy. So you're going to get kind of a ghosty image. There's really no white part on the bear at all. The lightest part's probably in the fish and the water. And on the bear itself, there's some light grays. So if you accidentally go away from those darker areas and you get into some of those others, that's okay, because we're going to do that anyway, eventually. And all those sketchy lines that we started with, those start to disappear. They start to become part of our object. Once we really start putting some graphite on there, you guys know pencil lead is called graphite, right? Back in the 16th century, when graphite was discovered in Germany, the guy thought it was lead. The German word for lead is Blei. So he called it lead, but it really wasn't lead. And for some reason, that just kind of stuck. It's not lead. It's never had lead in it. It's always been graphite. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my kneaded eraser and I'm just going to go back in. I'm going to fix up any edges that I feel like I need to fix up. Darken any of those edges with my pencil later on. But right now, I'm just going to go in and say, oh, okay, there's his ear. There's a little bit right there that kind of pokes out. And really under that ear, there's a little dark edge right there. It just helps me to start see things that maybe I didn't look at before or didn't see before. I'm going to clean up that fish a little bit there and a little bit there. So hopefully I've got my proportions are getting better. There's a little shine on his nose. I'm going to take my kneaded eraser and I'm going to pinch it down to a little point. And I'm going to pull out that little shine on his nose. Little one below it. Now we're still going to be doing some blending, still going to be using our pencil to get some darkness in there. At this point, I can even start putting in a little bit of the water with my pencil and his shadow that's on the water over here. If you wanted to, you could throw that in. the side of your pencil, just really lightly, just to remind yourself that's where it's at. You can see through the water to his paw under there, but it's just little dark areas. We'll put more of that in as it goes. But right now, just now analyze your drawing and say, okay, is it as big as I want it to be? Always draw big. Use your entire page. When we talk about composition, a good composition comes close to or touches 3 of the 4 sides of your paper. If your bear is floating in the middle and it's tiny, that's bad composition. You want to make it big. It's going to be easier for you to draw big anyway. Otherwise, you're using the tip of your pencil and trying to get all those little tiny details in. And that's hard to do. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to my 6B pencil. The 6B pencil is very soft, and therefore more graphite is going to rub off onto your page. And now what I want to do is I'm going to go in and I'm really going to get some dark areas. And so I'm still doing it my pencil this way. I'm not lining it like this yet because I just want dark areas. And he's fuzzy. I want to make sure that his fur stays fuzzy. So I'm just going to start adding some darker areas. And you kind of pick and choose where those dark areas go. You can always decide, hey, I'm going to use my cotton swab to do a little bit of blending. A little dark on the fish. And then that shadow that comes over, I think I'll just blend that with my cotton swab. How do you get your pencil to go darker and lighter? Got the same pencil, how come I can get it to go dark and light? Yeah, you just add a little pressure. So you got to decide, do I want to put more pressure? Do I want to put less pressure? This is one thing that this helps you to do. So when you're clear back on your pencil, then you can press lightly or not. This way, it's all the same pressure. This is a little more controllable. And I know it feels weird at first, but you decide. Some areas you want a little darker. Some of that fur area, you can see those little darker areas in the fur. You can place those in there. You can do little circles. You can go back and forth. You know, whatever is most comfortable for you. Right now, you're probably not very comfortable. It's because you're learning. Native Americans say you only learn through pain, which is sad because I don't like to have pain. But that's when we learn. So next time you go through pain, whether it's physical pain, spiritual pain, mental pain, just think to yourself, I'm learning. This is good. It's supposed to be good. It doesn't feel good. The other thing this does is as I draw, I kind of roll my pencil so that I always have a little sharp point. Because eventually I'm going to use that point to get some tight details. And I have to tell you, I always start with the head because the head is our emphasis area. And so, as you know, also when I draw people, I start with the head because that, again, is the most important place. And if you can nail the head, if you can get the head to look good, the rest of it will fall into place. It'll be okay. And even if the rest of it doesn't look as good as the head does, you got the head. So you spend a little extra time on the head, on the emphasis area. The rest of it will be just fine. So look at all those little shapes of darkness and just throw those little shapes of darkness in. And again, it's you got to kind of train your eye too to see those shapes. You know, all drawing is short-term memory. You've got to remember what an object looks like long enough to copy it or emulate it on your page, on your paper. So any little shape that you see, go ahead and see if you can copy that shape onto your page. A little spot of light that's on his nose, I just got to leave it out. Make sure I leave it out. And eventually you're going to get to the point, if you want to, because this just takes a little practice, where you can draw this better than the photograph. I know that's kind of a crazy concept, but you can do it. Because you can pick and choose what you leave in, what you draw. As I go around the fish, I'm just going to leave the fish out. I'm not going to draw a line around the fish. I'm just going to leave it out. Eventually, it'll come through. This is where you get your positive and negative space. So as I'm drawing all the dark area, that's creating a positive object or a positive space. Everything else around it is negative. Until you start looking at the fish, then it becomes positive, and the bear becomes negative. So I've got to move this leg over a little bit. And just keep adding the darkness, and if it's not in the right place, just draw it until it is. Any of those little dark areas in the fur, you just give it a little stroke with your pencil, and it'll come through. I'm trying to leave out the fins and the tail of our fish. The cool thing is all this darkness now, we're going to blend that too, and it'll look good too. Then we'll just keep layering in our graphite until we get just the right amount of graphite for it to go dark and light and to look good, whatever you want it to look like. Sometimes we don't really know what we want it to look like. Then you just keep drawing till you're satisfied. Notice we haven't drawn a line around anything. It'll come through. The edges take care of themselves. Also, where the fur kind of is dripping down, you want to just leave yourself those little lines down there, and that feathered line where you kind of drop it in, give it a little bit of pressure, and then kind of flip it, bring it up off the page, and you get these little feathery, soft lines. Those will look more like fur when you start blending them. That's a great way to do fur. That takes a little bit of practice. In fact, everything I'm showing you here is going to take a little bit of practice. where the water kind of comes up on the bear here, and there's little droplets and they kind of spread, just leave them out. Just do the in-between parts. You just leave it out. Nobody cares if that water is in the wrong spot. But the only things that are really important here are eyes, nose, ears, legs. Everything else you can fudge a little bit on. Even the size of the bear, whether he's a little thicker or a little thinner. And don't be afraid to leave some areas out. If you think to yourself, oh, I don't know if that's going to look good, don't draw it in. You can always come back in and add it later on if you start drawing and think, oh, I need that. So that 6B graphite pencil is quite soft, and it's putting on quite a bit of graphite on there. And as we go, we're going to now blend that. It's kind of like painting with dry media. Instead of having wet paint, we're going to have dry paint. Now I'm going to take my cotton swab, and I'm just going to do a little bit of blending of that. And as I bring it out, I can do all those grays in between. So now I'm just going to go back in it, and I'm going to start with the face. And I can bring any of that down, and you'll notice that now I can take that graphite that's on my cotton swab, and I can manipulate it. I can move it. I can bring some down. And you don't have to go over the whole thing. You're just moving some of that stuff around. You can pick some up from one place and move it over to another place. The more we go, the more gray it gets. And you can just take your little cotton swab and just touch little areas that you feel like, oh, there's a little fur there. Even in the fish, if you get to that point, you do some little shadows in the fish. Just use the tip of that cotton swab. When you get down to where the water is, just leave little areas out. We'll be able to take our kneaded eraser and pull out some of those lights again. Once you get enough graphite on your cotton swab, you start drawing with your cotton swab. So I can take that cotton swab now, and some of this fur that's up in here that's kind of a light gray, I can use that cotton swab to draw it and get that texture that's in there. My edges are nice and soft. I don't know if you've ever felt a bear pelt, but they're very soft. And you can start doing the water with your cotton swab too. So I can come in and just ever so lightly, just kind of dabble my cotton swab around, and all of a sudden you're going to get these little shapes of darkness and the water that's around it. And you can get dark and light. Here's his little shadow that's in there. Isn't that the easiest water you've ever drawn? It's almost like you don't draw it. You just kind of leave it out. You do some of the little shadows around, but the rest of it you just kind of leave out. And again, you can pick up some graphite from one place and move it to another. You can use your finger to blend and stuff, but well, when I was in school, they made us use our fingers, and this way is so much nicer. And then once you load that graphite onto that cotton swab, there's so much you can do with it. And if you start running out of graphite on your cotton swab, you just go back into your bear, pick up some more. You can move it over. Again, you just want the feeling of the water. We're not drawing every little droplet of water. And you can kind of fade that water out. So all the stuff that's down in here, you say, well, I don't want to have to draw that all in. So you just kind of fade it out. You know the river's over there. And if you want that rock in the background, you can add that with your cotton swab. Here's my rock. If you feel like you need it. I'm not sure we need it. If you want to put some of those trees in the background, you can do that with your cotton swab. Just little shadows. And you want them light and fluffy anyway, because they're in the background. Now that I've got my basics and I've still got some of those medium grays going on, I want some really dark darks. And so I'm going to take my kneaded eraser. I'm going to pull out any of the little lighter areas that I think I need. So there might be a few here and there, just a little light ones across his back. And I'm just going to take my kneaded eraser and pinch it down to like a little blade. Remember, the kneaded eraser absorbs the graphite. It doesn't rub it off. And so after a while, that little edge gets kind of dark with graphite, and I have to pinch a new edge. So just beware that that's what's going on. You can go in and just touch some of that, just a little bit. You only need some here and there. That's going to help our fur as well. Any highlights, like that little highlight in his nose, I kind of blended some of that out. I've got to go back in and touch that, make sure that little spot of his nose comes out. So now what I'm going to do is I want to go back into the detail mode. So I'm going to switch over to this. This is detail mode. I don't move very far with this, but I do want to go in and get some really dark areas in there. So I'm going to just go back in, get some of those really dark areas. I always start with eyes because eyes are very important. And anywhere else that you feel like you need some of that nice dark area. This is going to grind those darks into that surface. Getting some of those feathered lines, and just I want some contrast. I want it really dark right in there. Anywhere I think it needs to go really dark, and now I'm going to grind that in. Make sure it goes really dark. That is what makes your composition start to pop too. It really, that contrast is really more interesting. Without that contrast, it's kind of gray. Now, you can turn and twist your paper. I can't do that because I'm stuck to the page and it doesn't fit in my window. But I used to often turn and twist my paper so I wouldn't have to put my hand on the picture. But you do want to kind of keep your hand up off the picture a little bit so don't smear it. Then if you'd like to, you can come back into that and smear a little bit of that too. Again, nothing in the bear is white. So you want to leave some light areas, but never white. White, reserve that for the water and a little bit on the fish. And if you blend it into that fish too much and you think, oh, darn it, he's not white anymore, take your kneaded eraser, just touch him. Give him some more light. Try to make sure that his edges stay soft and fuzzy. Don't draw a line around them. When Lewis and Clark in 1804, when they started going across America, nobody had documented seeing a grizzly bear. They came across a grizzly bear and they shot him like 30 times before he finally died. And they kind of looked at their guns and said, we're going to need bigger guns out here. People had run into black bears and brown bears, but grizzlies were a whole different story. So I spend a little extra time on the head. Just that, and people focus on the head. The head and the fish there, that's our emphasis area. We put it up in this 1/3 quadrant of our page. That's pretty good composition. So once you get the head done. You've nailed it. It looks good. I think you can kind of move on to other parts of it and kind of relax a little bit. I have students every now and then that they'll bring me a drawing and everything but the head is done. And it's like, hey, what'd you do with the head? They always go, I'm scared of it. You know, I didn't want to do it. I'm scared of it. That's why I do it first. You just keep adding until it's about what you want. And if you think, oh, I added too much, take your kneaded eraser and go back into it. Some of this fur in here, it's a little dark, or a little lighter. So I'm just going to pinch my kneaded eraser down and just touch it. Just give it little tiny touches and suck up some of that graphite so that texture kind of comes back over there. So now that the head is mostly done, you can relax a little bit and kind of scribble through the rest of it. And even the water. Now I can go in, I can add some little darker areas. I haven't really drawn the water at all. I'm just using my cotton swab in there. Because I want it soft. If you draw it, then you get sharp, hard edges. But you also want darks within darks. So shadows are not all the same. There are darker areas within there. So you just go back over them. You can pull some of this graphite out from the bear and put it in the water. Like I say, if it's a lighter, softer area, you can leave it out or just do it with your cotton swab. Here I'm adding quite a bit of graphite to some of these darker areas. And then knowing that I can go back into them and soften them, pulling out some of that graphite onto my cotton swab. I can use that now somewhere else. And if you have little droplets of water and you think, oh, I wanted to see those little droplets of water, take your kneaded eraser, pinch it down, and pull out some of those little droplets of water. So at this point, we've got about 4 minutes left. You want to just kind of scribble through it, make sure that everything is, the head's done, the fish basically is done. You want to just kind of get to that point where you're satisfied with it. And one of the last things you want to do is, of course, sign it. Good place to sign this would be like right down here in the corner in the water or under his hind leg over there. However you want to do it, there's a good place to sign it. Hopefully you've had a little bit of fun today. Hopefully you've learned something. Hopefully you've done something you've never done before or never thought you could do. And hopefully that's made your life a little bit better, because art makes life better. And I hope you have a lovely day.